cheap solar power, batteries, and electric vehicles are changing the transport and energy sector as we know. I bring in guests to this podcast who will help you with their ideas to navigate this energy transition. Thank you for joining. Hi, Manny. Good afternoon.
Hi. Afternoon.
Yeah, we could have just walked in over a coffee because we are both in Manila, but it works this way also. Maybe you can introduce yourself and tell all the fantastic thing you have been doing, especially with the Electric Vehicle Association of the Philippines.
Yeah. So I'm Manny. I'm Executive Director of the Electric Vehicle Association of the Philippines, and also the Executive Director of the Enrique Razon Logistics Institute of the Salle University. So it's basically a transport and logistics institute founded in 2019. Yeah. So in addition to that, I also do consulting mostly in the EV space and other sustainable transport fields. Also, I'm doing consulting with a couple of development organizations. I've done work with ABB, World Bank. We've got different UN agencies like UNIDO, UNDP, UNESCO.
So whole spectrum.
Yeah, a whole spectrum sort of. An active project right now is with UNIDO, is the mobility asset project, which is focusing in the Philippines. But I've done also some work in Laos. Currently, I have also a level project with UNDP. Is more on the development of the mobility roadmap for Lebanon, and then I've done also some work for on the climate program.
Fantastic. And you've been also very actively involved in the sort of evolution of the Electric Vehicle Act and its approval, right?
Yeah, yes. The act was mostly based on a project that I led, which is an EU policy study for DTI way back in 2019. The study was funded by Mitsubishi and provided the groundworks for the electric vehicle development act. Actually, this was not the first that was made to draft an EV law. Attempt was made as early as 2011, and then several other attempts. Each time the Congress passes and then everything is reset. But finally, we were able to push through it. And I think what was most missing in the previous initiative was a comprehensive background analysis of the situation. And that's something that we had recently. So we're able to.
But the most of the provision that got approved remains similar to the 2009 version I saw, yeah, the 9-year tax holiday and everything. Do you want to take us through?
Sure.
It's quite exciting what has happened in the Philippines.
Yeah. So the EVA law provides, number one, it defines the roles of the different agencies, and it also mandates the creation of a technical working group consisting of the different agencies. That is something that has been lacking. There are different initiatives here and there. So DTI is doing their own stuff, DO is doing their own stuff, and then you have also DOTI doing something, and also DNR. But the provides mandates that to work together. So that's number one. So they now have defined roles and responsibilities, and the technical working group is headed by the Department of Energy, serving as the secretary. This is being chaired by the Department of Energy. So that's number one, provides the roles and responsibilities. Okay, number two also, it provides the minimum mandated adoptions. Well, that's critical. But again, I would emphasize it's minimal, which means then that if the situation allowed, and these targets would have to be expanded. And we see that in the GREVI. So the GREVI numbers are actually higher minimum mandates that are provided under the EV law. And it provides also some non-fiscal incentives, but it does not also limit the provision of additional non-fiscal incentives. Same thing also for the fiscal side. So for the fiscal incentives on the manufacturing side, it mandates that the manufacturing and other related manufacture of other related industries would be eligible for inclusion to the SIPP, which is the strategic priority program of the government. But in addition to that, it also mandates the creation of the electric vehicle incentive strategy. So I think that's quite important. The electric vehicle incentive strategy goes beyond what is provided by the SAP, which is basically anchored to the CREATE law. So the CREATE law mostly provides tax holidays and this kind of things. But the electric vehicle industry goes beyond this by providing, for example, fees, investments, support. So for under the draft, which is about to be maybe just an update for this electric vehicle incentive strategy. In principles, all the incentives that are proposed are approved already by the FIRB, which is the Financial Regulatory Board. Is now ready for signing of the government, but there are just certain things there that needs to be in place. So the FIRB wants legal review and also everything to look for a legal remedy such a way that the whatever incentives are provided is not anchored on the general appropriations.
I think you're getting into very technical. Now, my audience are international. So, what
Okay.
are the incentives for manufacturers on the supply side if someone to set it up? What are the incentives?
So the investor has two options. It could go to, it can tap on the incentives provided by the CREATE law, which is mostly number one, the income tax holidays. You have also enhanced deductions. It's mostly tax reduction.
Okay, good.
It may also tap on the electric vehicle incentive strategy, which is currently being finalized. So we're hoping that gets released early next year. There's just certain things that needs to be ironed out, but the full package is basically approved. So that includes fixed investment support, 50%. So if you're investing 1 billion, government will be reimbursing to you 500 million out of that 1 billion.
So in pesos, if you're sorry, these are in pesos, right?
Yeah.
So if somebody invests $20 million, the government will provide
$10 million. It will return the $10 million in the form of tax certificates.
Okay. Okay.
And you can use this for a lot of issues. Like you can use this to pay for your VAT when you import parts and components. And what we're trying to look at now is something also that could be used to pay for the income tax. But as you collect the income tax of the people, can use this to pay for it and to get the income tax, for example. So yeah, so you get 50% fixed investment support. And then second, you get also production volume incentive. Basically, it's a subsidy, production subsidy. So it's 10 to 20% of the X factory price of the product. So if you're spending, let's say, $300 to produce a certain product, then 20% of that is returned to you in the form of tax certificates. And the electric vehicle incentive strategy ties up the vehicle manufacturing side, parts and component side. It's also introducing a phased approach to localization. So for the first year, there is certain localization target, a very low one, and then that gets increased over time, over the next 3 years. So that's what the electric vehicle incentive strategies provide.
Okay, so that's also on the supply side. I understand if a company is involved into power generation of some kind, then that can be 100% foreign owned. But for the electric vehicle, you still have the 50% local ownership requirement, right?
Yes, that one still applies. But there's also a lot of incentives that has been introduced to the market in addition to the manufacturing side. So of course, you know that there's now zero tariffs in importing electric vehicles in the countries, and that includes all vehicle variants, the vehicle types, tricycles, motorcycles, buses, cars, and Jeepneys. That's also, of course, under the previous law or trade law, you have 0% excise tax. So these are actually the two mechanisms that really brought down the prices of BYDs. That's why you see now a lot of BYD in the market. But in addition to these, also on the charging infra side, of course, importation of the parts on the ends are tariff free. But in addition to that, if you force power, if you have a charging station that is forcing power from a renewable energy source through the green energy option, then the power that is purchased is battery. So you've got also this mechanism. But I think what's quite interesting here is you see a lot of drastic growth of BYDs and EVs on the ground on the road. And it's mostly because I mentioned the drastic reduction in prices. But in addition to that, it's the non-fiscal incentives where the vehicles are exempted from number coding. So
you
you
have to explain the number coding also.
Yeah, the number coding is like Metro Manila, and I think also in Cebu, there is this rule wherein your late number ends in 1 and 2, you cannot use the vehicles on Mondays, 3 and 4 on Tuesdays, so on and so forth. So this rule does not apply for electric vehicles. So if you're going to look at, for example, the sales, regional sales, it's mostly concentrated in regions where there is number coding. So I think the number coding is that there's a bigger motivation to buy an EV than maybe the cost reduction. You see most of these roads is the regions where there are number coding room.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I interviewed someone last week and he was saying the same thing. In Norway, one of the reason happened was that there are tax advantages, but on the highway, you could go electric vehicle without the requirement to have multiple passengers and things like, and that was very valuable. In the morning, you could half your travel time. But the difference there was that Norway did not include hybrid cars. In the Philippines, hybrids are included. Do you have any views on that?
Oh, that's a very good question. At the very start, that association were actually fighting for the inclusion of the hybrid electric vehicles. You said that hybrids are already market ready, they're very cost competitive, you don't need to provide any incentives, fiscal or non-fiscal. And whatever incentives you provide to hybrids will be actually a disincentive for the adoption of it's going to slow
Yep.
down the adoption of these. But apparently, somewhere along the way in the law, the EVs were included as part of the definition of EVs. So some of the legislators were calling us up when they were about to finalize it. Are we going to push for this? Certain legislators are pushing for pushing of hybrids. If we're not going to push for it, then it's going to be delayed again for the next 6 years or 3 to 6 years. Let's just push for it, but we just have to ensure that when the incentives are rolled out, then there will be a difference in the incentives provided. But we're actually really fighting for the non-inclusion. So after the law has been signed, we're fighting for the non-inclusion of hybrids in the tariff exemption. We're arguing that hybrids are really cost effective. You don't need to incentivize. That will just only lead to tax losses. That's number one. Then we're also arguing that let's not include hybrids in the number coding exceptions. Because that's going to drastically increase the number of vehicles in the roads because hybrids are already cheap as it is. Then you're going to incentivize it. Then that's going to add vehicles on the road during the day. So I think that impact is being felt now. I hope there will be a review of the policy, but we need to have the right transition. Like for now, hybrids are included, but for a certain time, they will be included. That's how do you manage it?
Yeah, it's a tricky call because a lot of people don't understand. They think hybrid is halfway there, which is not true. As when hybrid is actually a problem on both sides. You have an electric system with a very tiny battery, and you have the whole problem of the ICE car, right? And then they are not plug-in hybrid either. So this electricity that's coming from oil generated. So I don't know.
We're pushing for the inclusion of plug-in hybrids, but not the ordinary hybrids. The argument there is the pro-hybrids side saying, oh, Philippines is not so good. And then besides that, if you look at Myanmar, if you look at Laos, there's not even a law, and there are very few charging stations. You see lots of electric vehicles. Most of the time, you're charging a growing way. But of course, if you've got charging stations, it's going to help you sell EVs. Because psychologically, it doesn't impact on the rage anxiety side. Once you start using it, you're only going to use it very few times. So technically, this could be rolled out as it is. And if you always say that we're not ready, we're never going to be ready. So the vision association is very strong feeling about hybrids. The same. Hybrids don't help build charging stations. You need to have the demand for EVs or plug-in EVs so that you can come in and really build the charging. The more you include hybrids in the mix.
Absolutely. Now, tell me a bit more about your association because it's a very large setup now from your humble beginning, maybe before anyone else in Asia. You mentioned 2009, right?
Yeah, 2009. And remember, we had the first EV summit in a basketball court.
Yes.
In the distribution utility arm, Geraldo. And we had to finish everything at 4 o'clock. if there's a basketball game. So we started with that one on the basketball court. We have the exhibits, we have also the forum in there. It is a very small group. But now, during the last English summit, we occupied the four halls of one of the biggest exhibition areas in the Philippines, SMX. And next year, we're planning to separate the concert side from the exhibit side. So it's growing. So it started with the parts manufacturers, but now it has parts manufacturers. We've got also the big guys, the OEM guys. We've got also now the EV charging equipment suppliers, the charging developers and service providers. We've got property developers, and we have also formed an academic chapter and also the EV owner side, which they so it's growing.
Yeah. Wonderful. If somebody wants to be part of the association, do you need to be a OEM manufacturer? What are the criteria?
No, not really. You can be a individual member, you can be a corporate member. But if you're want to be a member of the association, then be doing some business related to these. But if you're a user, then you can be a member of the owner society. Yeah.
Yeah, fantastic. And what's the best way to find the EV association? You have a website, of course.
Yeah, there's a website, evap.com.ph. Yeah. By the way, I want to mention that EVAP is also one of the co-founders of AFEVA. AFEVA is the ASEAN Federation of Retail Associations.
Okay.
So it has Indonesia as members. We have two member associations in Indonesia, Perglindo and Isomoli. Isomoli is mostly on the light electric vehicles, more on two-wheelers. Perglindo in Indonesia, it's mainstream EV association. And then got also Singapore, Electric Vehicle Association of Singapore, EVAS. For Malaysia, it's EVA, Electric Vehicle Association of Malaysia. Thailand is EVAT. And then you've got also already Lao. Then we have straight members in Vietnam.
Amazing. Now, you as a collective, do you do promotional things to decipher some of those misinformation that are floating about our electric vehicle?
Yeah. Then definitely. First, for EVA, for example, one of the major things that we're really trying to address now is the lack of information and also presence of misinformation. That is something that we have been battling. It's true that we have this project right now with Bienvenido. So EVAP is part of that consortium that's managing and running the Bienvenido project. So we came up with the capacity building programs and the small module in Z101. So that includes the truths and this kind of things. The very basic thing, and there are some variations of the EV101. So we have a module, EV101 module targeting government agencies. Because it's also very important to educate government agencies about EV. You would surprise that there are some agencies that thought that there's no EV manufacturing ongoing. So the government agencies like the OTR and the NR should know that there's actually these things ongoing, for example. It's also important to provide government agencies the best practices and policies as part of the margin. So we've got also the EV101 for fleet operators, for example. So we provide them the basic information on how to evaluate these that are offered to them. What are the things that they need to look at? Really understand the specifications. So that's a very important thing for fleet operators because they're the ones who also use and assess also whether this is for my application. And also, of course, for fleet operators, the safety side is quite important. So, so we've got this EV101 and then we've got versions for different sectors. We've got also an EV101 module for financing, for the financing industry. We need also to be informed. So, that is something we've been battling. The lack of information and the misinformation.
Yes. But in terms of market size, I remember doing some work with you and MD Juan long time back, Romel, during the electric tricycle project of Asian Development Bank. At that time, our estimate was just Trike and others could be $12 billion market. But you take into buses and trucks, it's almost like a $50 to $100 billion market, no? And how far are we ahead in the market? Can you give us some numbers? Where are we?
For the electric Jeepneys, there's around 300 units running right now. For
Uh-huh.
there's around 300 out of maybe 5,000 modernized units, and modern GP units. But that is expected to change soon. So there is a project that's being crafted right now with World Bank and also with the GCF to finance electric jeepneys. So one of the main gaps of the jeepney modernization is the lack of financing. And even without any mandated adoption requirements, is to provide a financing program exclusively for e-jeepneys and what's going to shift the market. Especially that economics wise, it's a no brainer. So the industry already realized that like, it's going to save more by shifting to EVs, not only on the fuel consumption side, fuel costs, but also on the maintenance cost. So the industry already, the market already realized that EV is going to save them a lot in terms of maintenance costs and downtime. So the downtime for electric GPs are a lot lower compared to the conventional units. So under the Aries, the electric vehicle incentive strategy is targeting to roll out minimum of maximum of 50,000 electric GPs.
Wow, that's a huge project.
Yes. So that's on the electric GPs. On the tricycles, I think there's around 2 to 3 million tricycles in the country right now. That's a very big market, but that is a very tricky market. I think you're therefore with the tricycles. That's very tricky in the sense that you need to have the right technology for and the right configuration of tricycles for a given market. For example, for provinces that use the bigger tricycles, bigger capacities, because they basically function as in rural areas. They're the main mode of transport. But for Metro Manila, for example, tricycles operate inside streets. And the economics of tricycles in Metro Manila, it needs to be in such a way that it could be paid by whatever revenue is generated by operating inside streets. So the specs might be just for. But the thing is, there's no regulation. So it's quite picky. So the big one problem for the bicycles is there's lack really regulations because it's basically managed by the LGU. And it depends on the LGU. So there's no unified regulation on the shift to EVs. Number two, there's also lack of access to financing. So I think these are the two main gaps. There needs to be a regulation to shift, and of course, there needs to be financing to really push this. But that's a very big market, really around 2 to 3 million. So if just convert 50% of that, so that's a very big market. Motorcycles, that's also one market. Philippines is selling around 2 million bicycles a year. So that is something that we can tap on, especially that the prices of L3 bicycles is under the UN classification. You have L1, so you have the small one that you see all around, being given by mothers, being their kids to schools, going to the market. So these are L1, very slow ones, small, really just to be used for community trips. Then you have also L2, which is where these are the small electric three-wheelers, also for community trips. But the main market in the country is in L3, which are the bigger motorcycles. And there has been so much adoption of electric motorcycles under this category, but now it's increasing because the prices are going down. Okay, so definitely that is a growing market. The pricing is now getting very, very competitive. In fact, I would project 1 2 years from now that market will be so crowded by suppliers. Yeah. Taxis, that's a no-brainer. So even without any mandated adoption, you see that naturally the infusion of tax of electrified unit taxi sector is increasing. And the whole sector is realizing that. So as older taxis gets retired, there's a very big chance that the operator will be adopting an electric taxi even without any mandate of that one. For buses, previously the economics is quite difficult because of the very, very high upfront cost. But I'm surprised. It has now gone down drastically. In fact, we had a meeting in BGC. It was in BGC, there is a plan that the BGC bus operator has an initiative to electrify the, there's an offer to retrofit their older unit. So while we were discussing about the proposal, we're surprised that the bus cost now has gone down to 11 million. So the ones that's proposing for retrofitting cells, that's something that we cannot beat. So it's even now cheaper to buy a brand electric bus. And there's a higher brand. It's a good brand. So it's now cheaper to buy an electric bus than to retrofit an old ICE bus. So that's how low it has gone down. We were doing some analysis before. It's still at 2 years ago, it's at 25 million. It went down to 15, 17 million, but it's now at 11 million. Our units rolled out at 11 million versus the 7, 8 million the IC. So that pricing is actually a game changer. I think that's a growth area. For logistics, other prices has also been going down now, but the main problem for trucks is the Philippines still allow the importation of second-hand trucks. Because if you look at the economics of electric trucks versus brand new IC trucks, diesel trucks, it's very competitive. But if you look at the economics of the electric trucks versus a second-hand diesel truck, then that's where the problem comes in. But since we're still allowing second-hand diesel trucks, then yeah, that affects the market. So it's going to be a regulatory thing, really. So that alone, if you're able to plug the supply of second-hand trucks, that's going to spur the growth of electric trucks in the country. Yeah. Different markets in the Philippines, different barriers. For tricycles and jeepneys, it's mostly lack of financing. There's already market acceptance. For taxis, previously, the main challenge was lack of use cases, but now you've got that, so that's why you see how the sustain. It's not really the lack of financing, but the lack of use case. But if they're already, so market knows already it's going to work, so it's right now to sustain. Well, a job adoption. For buses, it used to be the high actual cost, but that one is now coming down. Once the market realizes that it's already gone down, well, I would assume that's going to grow also, basically with or without government interventions. Motorcycles, the main issue also before was high upfront cost, and because with upfront cost, the suppliers themselves for know that they don't have the market, so they're not here. But now with the lower price, so you now have also more suppliers coming in.
Amazing. Thank you so much. I'm just curious, one thing that you mentioned about retrofitting of ICE cars to electric. How big a market of that? Because I was thinking, again, outsiders looking in, all those discussion about jeepneys and preserving them, the culture, ideal would be to retrofit with a battery swap because they don't go very far. How is that? What's your opinion on that?
Okay. So it's a very good question because I did work on the decision program when it was all started before. So the main reason why we did not consider retrofitting is before we also look at why don't we just retrofit a new diesel, 2 to 4 diesel engine, right? Or electric. We thought that since we're investing in it, let's do it. So number one, if you look at the Jeepney was based on the World War II US war Jeepney designs. So if you look at the way the ratio, for example, it's too small. So that is to protect it from being fired on. So you're still adapting this design, which is not really designed for public transport. And then if you look at the jeepneys also, it is a very long nose because you need that before because you need to put the engine there. And because of that, it has become a safety hazard. So if you're sitting in a jeepney driver's seat, it also actually an obstacle 1 meter in front of the tip of the vehicle, which is one of the requirements for modern public transport safety wise. So the field of vision is quite limited. And also, if you look at the bumper of jeepneys, it's quite solid under international requirements. When a vehicle crashes also on a pedestrian at 15 kph, the bumper should give way rather than hurt the unhurt pedestrian. But if you look at the bumper of jeepneys, it's very solid. There's also lots of vibrations, external protrusions. So those things are like safety issues. Second, if you're going to retrofit the jeepneys, we're still maintaining the capacity of the vehicle. And that's not going to allow you to pay for the cost of retrofitting the unit. So the main idea also, you now have standing and then you bigger capacity. That is to generate more revenue so that you can pay for whatever loan that you're going to do in acquiring a new vehicle. The reason also why there is standing so that during peak hours in the morning and evening, you're able to expand the capacity. And you don't have also so many units. You don't have an overpopulation of units also during off-peak hours. And basically, the GP does not pass the safety regulations. So if you're going to require a UN technical regulations, it's going to be hard to replicate the GPs to eventually pass through this. So that's why it was decided, okay, let's just push for the modernization of the whole things and let's set up the right standards we need for the units. But of course, what came out was not really, I would say, is not really that ideal when you're looking at public transport. It's still not low, for example. It's still not convenient. It's because when we're defining the standards and there were also certain considerations, like the truck companies were saying, well, we don't advise to do low floor. That's going to increase the cost. That means we cannot make use of our existing platforms. So in this industrial argument, so just were some considerations. So this is why you've got the cheese in modern units as it is right now. But it could have been better with the right standards. So that's one thing. And that second thing also, I just learned this when we were discussing the BGC bus proposal. So the BGC guys were saying that hey, the model life cycle of buses is around 5 to 7 years. After 5 to 7 years, it's going to be hard anymore to look for the parts, like especially for the mechanical side. So if we're going to retrofit the unit that's going to prolong its life, then you'll face the problem of supply of the parts. Because they're saying even without retrofitting, they're already having lots of shorts. And then suddenly they also learned that the electric bus prices has gone down drastically. So that also makes the retrofitting initiative quite difficult economically. And then third one is there's only very few of the rally units that will be eligible for retrofit. So a lot of them are dilapidated. So there's no point in retrofitting that. Like for example, if you look Tricycles, it's common to see 10, 15 years, 17 years bicycle. There's no point in retrofitting that. The body is already so dilapidated. And if you look at the cost of a motorcycle, so tricycles, the Philippines are basically motorcycles, right? The sidecar. So if you consider retrofitting an old motorcycles, and if you can look at the cost breakdown of electric motorcycles, theoretically you're supposed to save only about 20 to 30%. Because that's the cost of the body. But there, bulk of the cost is in a way is you're gonna replace it. You need to put in the motor, you need to put in the so you have the first retrofit, save a bit, but with an old frame, not really designed for retrofitting for the new technology, or go for a new one with a brand new frame that's gonna last longer. That's the same also with the electric buses and other vehicles. Retrofitting could probably work for private cars, being the vehicles are not really that dilapidated. And because the thing with retrofitting is for each model, you need to have a different kit. The vehicle is not designed in the same way, everything. I've been asked before, so if you're going to wear something, what model are you going to advise? I told them an L300. But you see a lot of the L300, so you need to have only one kit. So that's a very important thing for retrofitting to work. You need to target what is mass adopted. Because if not, then it's going to be too costly. You have to redesign things for each of the models. But you've got the case of L300. As it is, I think you've got more than 2, 3 million of L300s or even more. That's a market. I've started to focus on L300. You've got a market on that. Then you've got also new ones considered the same. So you can target a certain age of. Yeah. So I think that's my point.
Anyone targeting the L300s retrofit?
Not yet at this point, but I think that those guys posing for BGC, I think they're thinking about it now. Yeah, because they realize that there's a thing with it, especially for buses. The thing is, you need to be able to balance it. And you need to do a reanalysis each time you retrofit because you've got a different model. That's not to be very big. The same also with the commercial vehicles like L300. But if you've got a model that is massive. You have to do it only once.
Yeah, fair point. But still, it's intriguing. I know you mentioned that they are not safe, they're poorly designed, falling apart. But if nothing gets done, somehow these old jeepneys will continue another 20 years for sure. Unsafe, uncertified. Is there a plan to ban these things in a particular date so you're forcing them to go and buy a new one? Is it viable, possible? What's the plan? Like what they have done in Boracay. You cannot drive a ice tricycle anymore, right?
Yeah. The plan now is to focus the jeepney modernization on 5 to 6 issues, highly urbanized cities. Because we know there's so much problem also with the jeepney modernization. So they decided, okay, let's focus on these things, is putting all the financing in there. But there are also problems now with the financing, land bank and ADP so high, the default loans are so high. So they stopped providing the loans. But with World Bank and GCF coming in, then you can again provide the loan and correcting all the other problems. But they would want to do this initially in just 4 to 5 issues. Very targeted. That's actually one of the main problem of the e-conversation. It has not been thoroughly piloted yet, but it was rolled out last year. So, but now that we know what are the problems really, socially, economically, technically, yeah. So I think that those learnings are being incorporated in the progress that are being backed up in these 5 to 6 issues. So
Wonderful.
that's the plan.
So, how large is the World Bank investment? How much are they investing?
They're still doing the numbers, but they're directly involved in the GCF program because there are 2 projects that are being crafted. World Bank is not touching, I think, Metro Manila. So GCF is focusing on Greater Metro Manila, but focusing on routes passing through. For that one, we're looking at replacing around 30,700, bringing in around 30,700 electric jeepneys. So that means that's going to replace around 27,000 traditional jeepneys. If you replace one modern jeepney with the one traditional jeepney with one modern jeepney, then you don't have the economics.
So that's about $30 million.
So that's about
$300 million.
for the
$10,000 a jeepney.
Jeepney, it's around 2.5 million.
Ah, okay.
Yeah. And then the plan is battery leasing. So we're going to bring down the initial cost to around 1.9 million. And then, of course, you've got the government subsidies coming in. So that's around 360,000. So starting at 2.6, remove the battery, do leasing, bring it down to about 2 million. You deduct around 300,000 from subsidies from the government. You're looking at 1.6 million, but the piece to be financed.
Wonderful. And you also have already battery manufacturing in the Philippines, right? Yeah.
There are some battery inverters existing. Some of the electric jeepney manufacturers are also producing their own, or assembling their own battery packs. And I think eventually, once there is a market adoption, a mass market adoption, then there will be more battery pack players will become, especially once you roll out the battery leasing program.
Philippines is ideal in a way because the Renewable Energy Act gives you tax-free almost everything importation and
Yeah.
batteries covered there. And you mentioned that electric vehicle components are also tax-free. And then you're giving tax holidays for companies to come in. So its overall package is very open. And then on the demand side, the demands got created by providing excise duty off, and
Yeah.
people are not paying, or sorry, the color coding or number coding, that they can have this car 20% more time because
Yeah.
rather than one day a week off, you can drive. So all the incentives are there. And then you are also bringing in a lot of education to take those misinformation, disinformation out. So everything is in favor of electric vehicle adoption.
Yeah.
What are
Yeah.
the numbers going to be in 5 years? Are we going to see 30% EV adoption?
Of course, there are government projections, right?
Yep,
There's also the EVAP or the industry projection. For the industry, we're looking at around 2.5 billion electrified vehicles on the road by 2030. But there's a combination of motorcycles, bicycles, jeepneys. or cars. Yeah. So that's the industry.
Fantastic. Is Toyota a member of Electric Vehicle Association of the Philippines?
Unfortunately not. But with Nissan, Mitsubishi, there are
Yeah.
members.
Yeah,
Honda,
because Toyota is also not member of the Australian Association.
already. Hopefully soon that will change because I think they have no choice. They have to buy the EVs. Now they're releasing some EVs. You know, of course, it's partnership, but I think with some Chinese EV platforms.
Yes, slowly, because the Mirai has failed miserably globally. And I think the whole hydrogen car, the fuel cell car, did not do that. I know people who actually bought them and said, we were promised there will be stations for us to refuel our cars. That never happened. So they're sitting on a stranded asset with a huge loss. So at least you don't have that issue if you're buying a BYD, no?
Yeah. And one of the major challenges before is, as you know, most of the EVs are Chinese made right now in the market. So globally, this how to convince the local market to buy Chinese brands. Because of course, traditionally, this market is operated by US, European brands and Chinese brands. If it's Chinese, something that was not really up to par. But I think that barrier has already been addressed. Because you see, if you look at the Chinese, they really look so good. So you're sitting on a European car. So I think that part was already been solved. But that was the one of the first. So right now we're also facing the problem with motorcycle. Because motorcycles in the country, 99% are Japanese.
Mm-hmm.
So the Stallion, Suzuki, Kawasaki. So the main question now is, will the market accept Chinese motorcycle brands or non-Japanese motorcycle brands? So that is something that is yet to be seen. But we're seeing our increasing adoption of these other electric motorcycle brands. So some of the guys that I'm talking with in the industry, they think, okay, we're going to position our electric motorcycles to be based on Japanese technology. So no, like we're going to manufacture motorcycles here. We're going to get the Japanese motor, at least, of course, battery would have to come from China. But with that, Japanese motor is something that we can say, well, this is Japanese technology. Yeah. So that's something that is yet to be accepted with the industry, whether a non-Japanese motorcycle will be accepted with the market.
Yeah, very interesting question because all the Apple products are made in China. Most of the Teslas coming in Asia and Australia are made in China. So, yeah, the perception, of course, the branding matters, but exactly as you said, it's slowly people are accepting Chinese car because first time I rented a Haval in Australia, what brand? I opted for a Honda car and they didn't have, they gave me a free upgrade and I got with this Haval and said, what do I do with this? What brand? And once you start noticing, you say, oh, there's quite a number of Havals out there. And now in Australia, I think we may have the largest right-hand vehicle market in the world, electric vehicle, and all manner of Chinese cars are there because Australia doesn't have any more manufacturing. We used to have old days. Adelaide had Mitsubishi, Melbourne had Toyota, and slowly and Nissan. All of them are gone. So there's nothing, no industry to protect.
You still
When
have the Chevrolet. There's this specific model of Chevrolet that we're producing in Australia, right?
yeah, but those are the Holdens are also gone. Ford used to do Fairmont, Falcon, all gone. So the Australian icon of Holden, Commodore, or a Fairmont Gia are not getting made locally. Everybody's after smaller cars. Nobody wants to drive a 5.8 liter, the Holden Capri. I used to drive one too. It's a nice car, but then you realize that even with a smaller electric car, you can get similar pickup, way much less cost. My Caprice used to cost 18 liters for 100 kilometer. Now my Tesla equivalent cost what, less than 14 kilowatt hour for the 100 kilometers. So it's a big change. And these 14 kilowatt hour coming from rooftop solar.
I think it also helps that there's really a shift in market preferences and market behavior. Before, durability is the number one factor that is bigger. So it's normal before to see 10-year cars, 15-year cars that are still with you.
Yep.
But now the market realizes the technology changes so fast that they don't really intend to hold onto their cars more than 5 years. Because that they know 5 years from now, or maybe 3 or 2 years, or even just 2 years from now, technology will be different. But there's no point in holding on their existing vehicles. They would want to adopt always the new. So I think that also helps some of the Chinese brands because then durability is not really that an issue anymore. It's really more on how high tech the vehicles are, how good looking the vehicles are, how comfortable are these vehicles. Not so much on durability anymore.
Then other aspect is all the things that were unthinkable before. Starting with autonomous vehicle. What's your view on the Philippines? It may not happen here for a while, but technology is there. And I have seen Chinese cars, autonomous running, just people testing them out. So do you have any views on autonomous car and where things might be here?
Yeah, technology wise, that is really good. But I think Philippines, not only on the autonomous cars, Philippines needs to have a policy advanced technologies and AI. Because as you would know, public transport is the main source of job generation. And then if you're going to automate everything, then that's going to be a problem. So let's say agriculture also, if you're going to automate the agriculture, that's going to increase production, but that's also going to eat up jobs. And that's of course, I'm ready for every, I'm not ready for with the agriculture industry, whether we're lacking manpower. But if we're lacking manpower, that's going to automate. But if you've got the manpower, it might be good to rationalize the production of autonomous vehicles. So Philippines need to have a different strategy compared to say to Japan. The Japan population is getting old. So they need more people. So yeah, definitely automation is a automated vehicles. It's a really good. Philippines needs to think how to approach automation and AI. Till now, I don't think we still have already have a
No, but the risk is if the law doesn't catch up, even for the fun of it, might bring in a car which switch on an automation and then you realize there's nobody driving because the enforcement that there must be a person in the car. How do you do? Here, you have a very dark tinted glasses allowed. I was just thinking that how do you police those things? Because technology, yes, there's a huge societal issues in terms of jobs and to protect those, but this technology will creep in. You will be able to retrofit your old car, even your ICE car, with an automation software, put a computer and do whatever gizmos you have to do.
I think you raised a very important point. Definitely in terms of infra and policies, it's got to be in there because in certain segments that it's something that you have no choice. It will really come in. But in terms of the mass public transport system that Philippines might have, think about it. It could be okay. We push for automation, but we need to find automated vehicles. But we need to find a way how to provide jobs to maybe in some other industries. That's why I don't want to separate automated vehicles from the whole job generation strategy in the country. Because yeah, we can push for automation. We can automate even our public transport as long as we can look for other alternatives for jobs.
The point I'm trying to make, most of the developing countries, including Philippines, you are not going to be the market maker, you have to be the market taker. So if all car becomes automated globally, you have to find a way that how do we bring that in with the less impact or whatever societal government objective had. But just saying, no, let's stop that happening will not stop. So I think that's the risk is because you don't want, happened to be the other day, I went to Antipolo, there was an EV thing. I was following a red car and he said, why this is so slow? He gave a right down indicator, then he decided not to go. And it eventually parked in the, I was so curious, who is the driver to see? And everybody was taking photos. So I parked my car, got out. Oh, this was a self-drive car. Someone just testing it out because it was an EV event. And that car could be on EDSA tomorrow without anybody knowing. So that's why I think the law needs to catch up.
Yeah, definitely the law, the infrastructure, because you need to also have the sensors and everything, right? And what I'm saying is Philippines needs already to talk about it.
Yes, that's the point.
It's something that's going to happen. Let's talk about it. There will be impacts. Let's try to see how to address those.
Yeah, absolutely. Because you're not going to make a market. None of the developing countries would. It will be a market being made, it will be the technology takers, so you may not have a choice. Just one last
Yeah,
question.
sure.
I think the Philippines will have a huge market for V2H. I see a lot of V2L, vehicle to load, and even Tesla now come up with the gizmo that you can connect.
Yeah.
All these off-grid electrification, V2L and V2H for even tricycles with a slightly larger batteries, even motorcycle coming in and helping people to get charging their mobile phone and everything else. And forget the V2G side of it, but are you guys working on it on the EVAP association? Because that's a big market, the transition to electric.
We're not actually working it, but there is in the association. But in the development workspace, we're talking about submitting a drafting a proposal because there's going to be a call, like an innovation call, but then it's an applied one. So, okay, let's focus on rolling out EVs in areas where it's going to be difficult to roll out EVs.
Mhm.
And this will be in areas where there's no reliable power supply plants and this kind of things. And we're basically thinking about the V2H, where EVs becomes more than just a vehicle, but they also serve other purposes, storing power, providing power, and this kind of thing. So definitely, it's something that will be relevant or right in areas where there's no stable power supply, in the upland areas. In last September, or I think it was October, September, we have ASEAN Battery Technology Conference in Thailand. And there was the session on battery swapping. So on standards. And then we were asked about our views on battery swapping. So I mentioned that, yeah, battery swapping would be quite tricky because because of the advancement in the battery technology, it's now more cost effective, just fast charging batteries, this kind of things. But there will be site specific areas where battery swapping will still be applicable. Like in upland areas, also like in off-grid areas, the swapping definitely would work there. It could provide a greater function other than providing transport services. Like could be integrated in the RE program, power up houses. That's gonna be the way to go in this case. And especially when we do microgrids, then yeah, they can play a very
Yeah.
yeah.
Basically, one forgets that you buy a Tesla power wall, it costs $15,000, used to, and in Australia. And then you buy a $20,000 car, maybe $30,000 now. That comes with a three times the size or four times the size of a battery for free, almost,
Yeah.
because that's not the purpose you brought in. But when you're not using the car, this is a huge home battery.
Even in non-off-grid areas, for example, I did a project we used in before. So we did an analysis for B2B applications in Mac and VA. You can look at the case of this BTOs, radio backhaul operations of time, and then backing on that time use difference. So we did the economics, we even factored in whatever battery station cost. And we realized that the economics work. It's just a matter of really exploring the public and coming up with the right percentage initially to open up acceptance of using your vehicle to provide power to your office, for example. So yeah, so I think it's a matter of coming up with the right use case. And then once you're able to demonstrate that and you demonstrate theoretical economics work, but if you're able to prove that in an actual use case, then yeah.
Yeah,
So,
then also maybe a huge market later on to convert this one directional charger into bidirectional chargers, the inverters.
I'm doing a project right now in Lebanon. The main issue with Lebanon is you put only 2 to 4 hours power in a day. So definitely that's one area that we're looking at. Pushing for bidirectional chargers, looking for batteries, slacks. This is Lebanon, for example, there's a lot of decentralized solar PV capacity. And 50% of those of the power generated from these systems are actually lost due to lack of power storage. So that alone, if we're able to make use of that losses, that alone should be able to power the PV adoptions in the next few years in Lebanon. So that's what we're looking at. So that you're right, but that would mean that you look at the incentives, for example, to bring in the directional chargers, Maybe you can provide more incentives for vehicles that are able to do V2G. But of course, they're more expensive. But if you can provide them more incentives, then that can open up. So these are the things that we're looking at.
Absolutely. Yeah, no. I interviewed someone who's working with the startup in Lebanon last month. So yeah, I'm a little bit aware of those things. Thank you so much for your time. And is there anything else? I learned a lot of things from the discussion. Anything else you want to share?
Yeah, I think one interesting thing also is pushing for electric trucks. There could be business models, especially for the corporate world. Yeah, it's something that needs also, which maybe some other time schedule a meeting.
Yeah, I interviewed one of our colleagues who's doing a big large trucks in Australia. So I can also connect you with him if you are interested. But a lot of things happening globally on electric trucks.
Doing some ESCO type thing for trucks, for electric trucks.
Thank you so much for your time. Thank you, Manny.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, nice to see you again.
Thank you. We hope you enjoyed this episode of Energypreneurs. To continue listening to this conversation, please visit us at Energypreneurs. Thank you. See you next time.